Welcome to the Monday Manager Show. In this episode, we speak with Tapsi Chhabra, who is an executive charisma, personal branding, and communications coach. Tapsi has a very interesting journey where she's gone from teaching kids in a classroom to today working with some of the leading business leaders and leading organizations in our country and helping them communicate more effectively and lead their teams with greater authenticity. So I hope you'll enjoy.
Tapsi, welcome to my podcast. Thank you so much for agreeing. I'm excited to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and do you mind if we jump right into the tricky questions?
I prefer it that way. Let's get started.
Great. So uh, let me know if I got this right. You coach entrepreneurs and leaders
Mm,
on their communication skills, how to be
yes.
more charismatic, help build
Mm-hmm.
their personal brand.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into something like this in the first place? Because
So,
it's not a normal career track that in India we are told to follow, right?
yeah. And it's not something you start with in your career either. So,
Yeah.
how it all got started was after I finished my engineering in information technology. I realized that I wanted a more people-focused career and not something that has me behind the screen for hours fixing bugs in other people's programs.
Right.
So I think it takes a while for you to know who you are, and 16 is not the age to do it. So I think at 22 I had a hunch as to what I want to do, and I wanted it to be more people focused. And communication was always something I was naturally interested in, slightly better than others at. So I thought of exploring this, and I found out about the CELTA program from the Cambridge University, where they train you how to teach adults, and that fit right into what I wanted to do because teaching children was just not what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with adults, and I wanted to learn how you learn after you're 18. So I did that. Fortunately, worked with the British Council for about 5 years, after which, as a teacher, you have to choose a path,
Yeah.
a specialism. Once you've seen it all in terms of general communication teaching, I had many options: young learner specialist, business communication, information technology, ed tech, basically. I just had an interest in how people communicate in the workplace because I feel like we spend so much time there, and learning how to communicate and really advocating for yourself as a working professional is something I was very interested in. So I specialized in that, and that's how I got into coaching corporates on how to communicate within the workplace.
Very interesting. And that brings me to the question that adults are, at least the impression that I get from the outside is adults are harder to teach and coach than kids, right? So,
Mm,
and you're dealing with corporate professionals, people who have formed their identity to a certain extent
hmm
and then work and coach with them. So, what's the biggest challenge you face when you work with corporate professionals?
I think there are different kinds of challenges in different settings. I think if the training program has come from above, someone in a leadership role wants their team to be trained on communication, and the team doesn't see it that way.
Mm,
That is one of the biggest challenges we face, where one party, the paying party, feels like there's a gap, and the
right.
people in the class have just been asked to be there without really getting them into the conversation of why they're there.
Hmm.
So I think that's one of the bigger challenges we face, and how we take care of it is to get everybody in the same room
Okay.
to really make the why come out in the open, and have people sort of agree on why what we're doing is important and why they should invest their limited time, energy, resources on communication, which they think they're mostly good at. The
Right.
second challenge that gets, a little tricky is that what the management thinks they need to learn and what they think the gaps are very different. So one is getting them to agree that they need training, and then trying to agree on the curriculum,
Hmm.
which makes sense to both people on top as well as the participants themselves. These are the kinds of challenges we work with every day. But what we don't work with, in comparison to children, like you said, is managing energies. So I think what I find difficult is managing the energy of children in the room. I
Right.
think adults are much more sorted and are much more restrained in how they come across in the classroom. So I think
Yeah, they're
that's
not running out of the class.
no, and they're not coming and pulling your cheeks. I've had that in my classes with kids.
True. So
Mm.
you mentioned a very interesting dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
One, like in the first challenge which you mentioned, where the management feels that the team needs certain things. The
Hmm.
team doesn't see it that way.
No.
Right? And then in the whole task that you face is how do you get their buy-in, right?
Mm.
So over the years, like, have you developed some kind of a process, or is every situation different in terms of getting that buy-in?
I think it's mostly the same. So what we do is an induction session before we begin anything. So we try to get all the participants in the same room as the management. And we start the conversation, like we're the mediators. We start the conversation and we say, this is what your manager feels that we need to work on. This is what we're thinking of working on. What do you think? What do you need? Okay. And we try to get them talking about their challenges in the workplace. And then we try to map what we've been asked to create asked to include in the curriculum with what they need. And usually there's like about a 50% overlap. And then we also talk about why they need to work on other things and why they might need to deal with topics that they don't think they need because there's a business need for it. And
Okay.
we usually tie it to their growth. So it's important for them to see that it's related to their overall career growth to get their
Right.
buy-in. So this is an induction session that happens before every program. And we also then follow it up with a needs analysis where there's a form that's filled by each and every participant, as well as there's a focus group
Okay.
with as many people as possible. And
Mhm.
that just gives us a very strong hold on what each party wants and that everybody is involved in the discussion. Because as an adult, you don't want to be left out of the decision and you can't be
Right.
forced to be in a class that you don't see value in.
Mhm. And any difficult situations where you have had trouble getting that buy-in despite all of this?
Only when it's the senior leadership that's concerned. So
Okay.
I've in a company is that files patents for scientists. I had a class full of VPs and business unit leaders. Okay,
Right.
and they didn't see a point in why they needed to, improve their presentation skills.
Okay.
So to have them take the curriculum seriously was really hard. And what we
Mhm.
did was to start with a pre-test of sorts where they had to walk in and give a presentation that was recorded and played back for them to see the gaps.
Okay.
Because sometimes someone telling you will not convince you that
Yeah.
there's a gap there, but seeing yourself on screen in a safe environment with your colleagues, where everybody else is also being filmed and going through the same process, that really helps get them interested in the curriculum.
Very interesting. And how do you map like the process of their behavior changing? Like, are there certain inflection points in the course of your delivering that whole curriculum, etc., where you notice, okay, this guy or this lady who were giving me trouble or who weren't buying into it, today I saw that something shifted in them. Like, are there those points where you notice that when you're doing that whole course and curriculum?
That's an interesting question. I had a lot of different scenarios, so
Yeah.
every batch is different. But I think you get about 30% of people paying attention from the very first class, but the others mostly realize the importance of what's happening at midpoint in the
Okay.
course. So we have a pre-test, which is basically a diagnostic activity to see where the gaps are for us as well as for them. Then there's a mid-course test, especially if the program is over 36 hours, which is about 6 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
6 to 8 weeks. So at a 3 or a 4 week mark, we have another midterm assessment. So that's where they see that it's been a month since we've been
Mm.
working at this and we've really made progress, or we haven't made progress,
Yeah.
or the person sitting next to me has really made progress. So I better be paying attention.
Right.
So usually that's the point where they see. But yeah, so that's another 30 to 40%. But there are always a few who don't really get the point of the exercise, and you've
Okay.
got to let that go. You've got to take your wins where you can get them.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that brings me to the question that in any, and especially in a corporate setting, if there are certain teams
Mm.
involved and things, there are certain group dynamics at play. There'll
Yeah.
be kind of even an unofficial group leader and things like that. So do those also play out in your training? Like if that unofficial influencer, you can call them the influencer, has bought in or hasn't bought into the approach, then the whole group dynamics also change?
I haven't had that problem to a
Okay.
great extent, as far as I can remember. But even if that happens, I think with adults, that's the thing. If you talk about what's in it for them, they usually come around.
Okay.
And knowing that there are stakeholders who paid for this, who are looking into whether you're doing this or not, really helps. And another thing we do to really incentivize learning is to tie it to their performance reviews.
Okay.
Or at least we try to. Many companies don't have that provision. It can't be tied to a raise or the performance rating that they get in appraisals. But that's our suggestion to all companies we work with. As long as you incentivize something, it gets done, I think.
Okay.
And I mean, if it ties to their growth in a real way, they don't see it as an optional exercise that's been forced on them. They see it
Right.
as a valuable part of their growth, of their journey of growing through the organization, or
Right.
even in their careers. And that's what I tend to tell them in the induction session as well, that this skill is not going to help you just with this company. Even if you want to move in the future to a better role, another country, or a different company, this is going to stay with you forever.
Right. Understood. And have you ever had situations where it's the team that really wants to do this kind of a training and things, and it's the management that needs convincing? Or is it
Yes,
always the management who's bringing you in and doing the trainings and things like that?
we only work with the management. So if
Okay.
there is a team out there who wants to train, they'll have to go through their managers. But yes, we did receive a request last year where the team, it was a small, very high performing team in an up and coming IT company in Bangalore. And their manager said that they've requested training. So I want to find out what you have. So yes, of course, we have teams who are very self-aware and who see the impediments in their career that come with not being able to communicate, especially the teams that work with English speaking countries. So there, the need is pretty apparent and there's no convincing required. And it kind of does come from the participants themselves.
Right.
Mm.
And how do you keep yourself going? Like, I assume that you have some kind of a curriculum for your trainings, right?
Mm.
How do you keep that motivation going after having trained so many different companies and teams and things that, okay, now next team, I'll approach them with that same enthusiasm and excitement. Like, do you ever feel like your energy level is a bit down, or does that vary? How do you keep that going?
I think that's a good question. I have been extremely passionate about communication training for a long time. But as you know, with any career or anything that goes on for a long time, there are peaks and troughs. And if I feel like my energy is dipping, I bring in my star trainers and my team to do the work while I do the curriculum design. So it is in my oversight at all times, but I take myself out of the classroom to do research, to find new activities. So you're right. So we've got a curriculum, and putting that into classroom again and again and again can get a bit boring. But that's when you decide to reinvent. You see what's new. You try to teach the same thing in a different way for yourself, maybe not just for the participants, because it's new for them in any way. But also, I think the world is changing pretty quickly, and the needs change as well. So, for
Yeah.
example, executive presence was not a part of our portfolio until 2 years ago.
Okay.
But now, as we train people who are quite high up in the ladder, executive presence is what they need because language and communication is already taken care of. So what they need to have is a presence, sometimes in media, they're spokespeople, or sometimes in board meetings where they justify the decisions they've taken over the year. So I felt like, so I feel like these kinds of changes keep me going, and every company is different, every team is different. I think it never gets boring.
Right. And how did you go about building your own team? Like you mentioned, you bring in your star trainers and you bring in other team members. How did you go about that process?
So I have immense respect for people I've worked with in the past in my previous organization. They are literally the best trainers in the country who have been recruited to be a part of a team that is delivering exceptional results in the area of communication training. So I invited my ex-colleagues to partner with me on these
Okay.
because I know that they've been trained by the best. I know that they've had practice and feedback over years through which they've refined their craft. And I can send them into a training program with my eyes closed, with the trust that you should have in your team. So I'm very grateful that a lot of them kind of agreed to work with me, even if it was just on a part-time basis. So that's how I make sure the quality is maintained even when I'm not there in the classroom.
Yeah. No, that's very hard to come by, to
Yeah, I feel
have this
fortunate.
group that you can fall back on or to
Yeah,
call up
yeah,
and who are of a certain skill level. Because that's what most
absolutely.
corporates nowadays are struggling with, right?
Yeah.
Is finding that skilled talent who can come in, perform,
Mm.
and grow. So you say that you've now moved to working on executive presence and helping leaders with that. So what does that entail? Like executive presence, it uh, sounds, at least to me from the outside. By the way, I am a layman. I don't know much
It's
about
okay.
these terms. At least it sounds to me like something about how they carry themselves and
Mm.
things like that. So how did you do this? How did you come up with this whole idea? Like, was it something you had been thinking of for a while?
So I like to read. And I recently, I mean, not that recent, but let's say 2 years ago, got into reading these books from the Harvard Business Review. And in one of those books in that series, I saw this word called executive presence. And I was intrigued. I kind of picked up the book, saw what was in it. And I found out that it was a lot to do with what I already do, but it adds the element of communicating grit and charisma as a leader.
Mm.
And I feel like unofficially, I tend to do a lot of that already in my classroom. But if I have the science and the research and the content that really helps develop an intangible yet very important skill like that, and I could give people that, I thought it would be very useful as a pursuit. So we added that as a workshop only for senior leaders, only people who don't struggle with communication, but rather have more to do with how they present themselves in different situations. And it also led me into the world of personal branding, which is, communicating yourself on platforms like LinkedIn, for example, through, saying what you believe in powerfully. So that's how I came across this particular area of expertise.
And how did leaders react to this whole idea that would it be leaders who would approach you, or I would guess initially you would be the one reaching out that, hey, we have this new program that we have developed. How did you find those initial leaders?
So initially, I think I was part of the BNI group,
Okay.
and my first and my most memorable student of that workshop came from a reference. And he is the CEO who has $1 billion portfolio and who manages manufacturing and distribution of trains all over Europe and India.
Mhm.
And I think that trust came through a reference for the first time. And for the first time, I saw the value of what that could bring in. Because as, let's say, a young person who always admired people who have roles like that from afar, I didn't think a leader would even need something like that.
Right.
You don't get to that place until you have a certain presence and a certain credibility that's shown
Yeah.
through a track record. But the truth is that you might be really good at what you do and you might produce business results, but how you carry yourself is a different ballgame altogether. And unfortunately, a lot of our curriculums don't cover that. And that gentleman was from IIT IIM, the best in the country. And somehow we don't carry that. So somehow we don't teach that to our leaders. So
Right.
that was that this is needed. And this can really help people
And what was the kind
in
of
coming across.
transformation that you noticed? Because, like you said, this is someone highly accomplished, already a
Mm,
successful leader, right?
mm,
So, someone from the outside would think, do they, like you said, like, does this person even need something like this? But
exactly.
did you notice that what was the transformation that happened there?
While I'm not privy to their private meetings, and but what I heard from him and from the person who his I think the founder's office
Mhm.
for that person, what I found out was that he was better able to balance warmth with compassion. I think that's
Right.
one of the key takeaways from our trainings, that sometimes when you're very competent, you don't tend to focus on relationships. So, for example, if you're starting a board meeting, rather than going straight into numbers, you greet people, especially if you're online, you're talking to a team that's spread across the world. You take a few seconds to be a warm human being first,
Yeah.
and then get into everything else that you need to get into. So I think that was a big change that I saw. A little bit more empathy, a little bit more focus on connecting with people before you do business with them. And I think that's a win for me.
Yeah. And what intrigues me though about this whole thing is that usually we would think that, this is someone successful, they have already got
Mm,
everything sorted. But here is
mm,
a business leader, a very successful one, like you said, $1 billion portfolio. They also need a coach, right? They
they
also
do.
needed someone from
Mm,
the outside to come in and improve
mm-hmm,
certain things um, in how they go about leading, right?
mm-hmm.
And that is something that seems very surprising to many people. Have you
It
noticed that
does.
before?
It does. Like I said, as a coach myself, I was intrigued and completely pleasantly surprised to see that it's a real need for people. And what really floors me and what really inspires me is how humble these people are to admit that, this little specific skill is something I need help with. And I will take the help of a person who's probably 20 years younger to me, but has the expertise with the humility of a true leader. I think that itself is a trademark of a leader, of a leadership quality that's very rare these days. The willingness and the guts to admit that there's something that you need to improve on still.
Yeah. Which brings me naturally leads to this question that have you faced challenges where people have refused to take you seriously when you were a young trainer? How
Yes.
did you handle those situations?
Um, to be honest, they were very difficult situations because it was a very unanticipated problem. Like I should have known, but I think I was too young to even realize
Yeah.
that my age would be looked at differently,
Hmm.
especially since I was training adults. Like that was something I did not anticipate at all. And I remember this incident very clearly. It was about 15 years ago. I was 22 and I just started teaching at my previous organization, and it was a class of young learners. And I was doing a class where we were studying the past continuous. And in drawing a timeline, to give an example, I inadvertently revealed my age. And that one of the children went back and said, "Oh, my teacher is 22." And the parent came to complain the next day that why is a child teaching my 15-year-old? She's just 7 years ahead of him. And how I dealt with it after I got over the initial shock was to send over my qualifications and to assure them that I am more than qualified to take these classes. And if you feel at the end of the course that there has been no improvement, I'm here. I'm accountable for that growth that you're looking for. And I remember on the last day when they came in for the parent teacher meet, I think they were very, very happy. And they did bring that up, and they brought up their apprehensions and how there was nothing to worry about in the first place. So I think that just taught me to not care about it a lot. It prepared me for everything that had to come after, because I hadn't started teaching corporates back then.
Okay.
But, when I started doing corporate training, I was 27. That's also quite young
Yeah.
if you think about it. So I just had to learn to develop a thick skin and be really good at what I do so
Mm.
that, people don't worry about getting the results that they're there for.
Yeah.
And you employ a lot of strategies. You sometimes send in an older person to close the deal, or you choose the right team member, like I said. So we had clients that were government colleges or
Hmm.
even embassies of different countries. So we would choose. So I was leading the team of trainers back then, and part of my job was to select the right trainer for the job. So I think that helped as well, to make sure that if there were some very strong barriers around age, you can't get over them in a day. You can't get over them in a couple of conversations. So you've got to be vigilant about that, and you've got to be empathetic and help people. So for corporates, remember, it's already a difficult experience coming into a classroom with the humility to learn something new from someone who's maybe your age or slightly older. So I think I had a lot of respect for that. And I didn't try to push myself into a situation where they just could not, they did not have the capacity to see beyond the age. So we did a range of things. So wherever we could have a conversation about it and reassure them, we did that. And where it did not work, we sent trainers who were 10 years ahead of me to take care of the workload.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you would walk into these first meetings with these management teams, etc., like how long would it take for you to figure out, okay, for them, my age is proving to be a stumbling block?
Oh, the first 15 minutes. But
Okay.
the funny thing was that if they said, "Oh, can I speak to your manager?" She was 2 years ahead of me. So they didn't really have a choice. That's like, yeah, sure, I'll bring her in tomorrow. And they'd be like, "Oh, she just looks just like you." And she was head of corporate training India. Okay. So we were a team of young people doing good work. So that's how it was.
And often when you are a group of young people doing great work at, you know, big scale, big projects, you create a lot of great memories. Like any fond memory from your early years that you still remember and you're like, oh wow, that was some great work that we did.
You mean with the team?
Yeah, with the team.
So we've had very few opportunities to work together.
Okay.
Um, but I think, hmm, that's a good question. I think the only time I worked with another teacher was when we had to co-teach a class. And when you're co-teaching a class, even if you don't try, like even if they try their hardest not to compare the two teachers, there's a lot of comparison coming in. So we would just come back to the staff room and laugh about how we know what's going to come up in conversations about, oh, this teacher's good at this, but that one's not going to help us with that. And this teacher's good at this, and that one's better or worse. So we would just laugh about it. And yeah, I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah. And now, Tapsi, you have also started helping people with leaders with their social media presence, specifically, I
Mm,
think, LinkedIn. How
yeah,
has that experience been?
it's still new,
Okay.
but I'm really enjoying myself because it, what I love about this work? I think any work that's related to marketing, especially for a human being, it makes you go deep into who you are,
Mm,
especially if you're not bluffing or faking online. You need to go really deep into who you are, what your values are, what do you have to say to the world, what makes you different,
yeah.
and what are your hot takes on the industry that you're in. So it takes an equal measure of bravery and self-awareness. And that's what I love about it. I love interacting people about who they are, having them think really deeply about it and having the bravery to share some real stories online. So it's been a joy hearing those stories and writing about them.
One thing which I have found when I've interacted with leaders, especially
Mm,
when it comes to them sharing stuff on social forums and things like
mm,
that, is this whole imposter syndrome kind of thing. Like, who will listen to what I have to share?
mm,
Or I don't have that unique of a POV, or everyone else is
mm,
also sharing it. How is what I
mm, mm.
share different? So, have you interacted? Have you found that with the leaders that you have worked with, and how have you, if you have, how have you helped them overcome that?
That is literally every client that I pitch to.
Okay.
So it's quite understandable. And there's a lot of chatter on LinkedIn these days. So they're not wrong entirely. But what separates one person from another is their personal stories. So
Mm,
that's what I tell everybody I work with, that we're not going to write generic things only. We're going to talk about your specific stories that have led to very specific learning that you can share with other people. So the way to write on LinkedIn or on any social media platform is a very unselfish way of writing. So instead of saying, oh, you know what? I started here, I moved on to this middle management role, and now I'm a leader of a Fortune 500 company. That's not what the audience is interested about. Why should they spend 2 minutes of their life that they're never going to get back on that? You've got to write it in an unselfish way where you talk about, okay, what made you go from point A to point B? What are the lessons you learned? And those lessons usually come about when you talk about a story, a real incident. So I assure them that that's what we'll be working with. And usually those are the posts that do the best, you know. And the second thing is that even if you say something that somebody else has said, the point of communicating with a faceless audience on social media is to relate with them. So
Yeah.
if somebody can relate with what has already happened to you, I think that's a great point of connection, a starting point of conversation.
Yeah.
So
And putting yourself out there, though, is something that drives a lot of insecurity, right? Oh,
it
I'm
does.
sharing this vulnerable post about my experience. How
Mm,
will people react? Or once I have
mm,
put it out there, then, oh, it has got there's crickets. There's like not many reactions coming in. That's sometimes
yeah,
that happens, or sometimes negative comments come in. How do you help these leaders tackle that?
it's a tough one. I think the one thing that genuinely helps the people I work with, especially if it's a vulnerable thing that they've said. So first things first, I never force them to say something that they're not ready to share. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's a good strategy. If someone is selling that as a strategy to win, I think that's just pushing yourself too far. And that client is very likely to stop doing that altogether in the future if they feel like um, they've been exposed in some way.
Hmm.
So you've got to be a little bit more empathetic about the fear of being seen, especially in high stakes environments like the workplace, which is what LinkedIn is. So, first of all, I never force them to put something out there that they're not comfortable with. Second of all, usually, if that's something very vulnerable, proportionate to how vulnerable it is, people will say something that, they relate to. And I think seeing another human being at the other end of a screen writing saying that I have had the same experience and I relate to you kind of takes that fear away slowly. So like I said, the purpose of anything you put out on social media is one, yes, to be visible. If you're visible, people remember you, but also to connect with people. So I kind of really make sure that that is active in their existence, and it's in their existence when they're putting things out there. The purpose is not to impress, it's to connect. That helps, I think.
Yeah.
And to answer your question about crickets, it's always good to remember that people may not be interacting with your posts, but they are watching you. And when the right opportunity comes through, when something really touches them, they are going to get in touch with you. Might write something. And even if you don't, you might have contributed more than you know. I think there are a lot of lurkers online, and it's good to remember that people are watching, even if it's silent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are difficult lessons, of course. It takes some time.
Mm,
It takes, those changes, those mental shifts are often the hardest to make.
absolutely. And I think the fear of being seen is just so primal with all of us. And I think if it's a young leader that I work with, there's another thing that I say to them. This putting yourself out there in text on LinkedIn is one of the safest ways to practice putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
Every and any growth and opportunity that people get is when they put themselves out there. This is one of the safest ways you can practice that and bit by bit get over the fear of being seen. Because if you want to grow, you got to practice rejection, which is basically not getting likes,
Yeah.
comments, or the reactions that you want, and just consistently putting yourself out there and making yourself available to opportunities that might exist beyond your immediate workspace.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And Tapsi, having worked with so many leaders over the years, you have seen corporate dynamics, etc. What have, how have those interactions influenced your own personal leadership journey?
I think you learn all sorts of things. You learn what to do, and you learn what not to do either. And I think the biggest thing that I have taken away from all my interactions with senior leaders is that we might put them on a pedestal, but they're all still human. And that allows for me to also honor my humanity, especially when I make mistakes, when I make the wrong decision. It helps me recover more quickly and with more compassion for myself, because when I see other people being human, I can allow myself to be human as well. And I think that's one of the things that leaders need to do more of right now.
Yeah. And
Mm.
right now, do you have a team that you work with, or is it more you work as a solo operator?
Mm.
How is it?
So I have a team that works with me on project basis.
Okay.
So it's basically a team of trainers that I work with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood.
Mm.
So, what challenges do you face in terms of managing your own work in this kind of a situation where you're working with a team of trainers? Then, is it
Mm.
just you going and prospecting for new work?
Mm.
Is it coming through referrals? Because often having a team with you there to fall back on, support you can also be a very powerful thing. right? So how does it
Mm.
work for you right now?
So right now, I am not doing much prospecting, actively going out in the market. I've had a lot of work through referrals,
Hmm.
and that keeps me busy with some other things that I do as well.
Yeah.
So there's not much of a team to manage right now, but with teachers that I work with, it's the challenges are unique. So it's to make sure that they understand what the client needs, that they're aligned with the curriculum.
Hmm.
Because I worked with some really powerful trainers who might have their own opinions about what is required in this process. But I'm the one who's been in multiple discussions with the client, so I have a deeper understanding of what they need. So I do things like including them in conversations with the client, having them in the induction session, maybe having them lead it if I'm not
Hmm.
doing the training myself. So these are the kinds of issues that I work with. And sometimes, a particularly challenging batch might be difficult to handle for some of the trainers, and they might not enjoy working in that environment a bit. So managing emotions, managing motivation in that sense as well is the challenge that I face.
Any special advice on how do you help these teachers also stay motivated, stay on task, and because you are the one accountable for delivering that result for that
Yes.
group, right? So how do you
Mm.
handle that?
Um, Usually I haven't had major problems in this area, to be honest. I've been very fortunate to work with very professional trainers. But if I were to, have trouble in this area, I think I would hear them out completely and really be able to pinpoint the problems that we have. And if required, talk to the company about how to deal with it and manage it together. So it's
Hmm.
not like I am accountable and the teachers who work with me are separate from that. They are my team and I'm on their team. And I will work with the organization to make sure that any challenges that the teachers are facing are being taken care of. Like I'm absolutely on their side.
Okay,
And I absolutely respect the fact that they've chosen to work with me on this. So I'm very actively looking at solutions to any problems that they might be facing. And
right.
I trust them. I trust them to deliver results. I wouldn't engage somebody I don't trust. So that's not a problem usually.
Okay, understood.
Mm.
And have
Yeah.
there ever been times when you have said no to clients? Like you have refused to take on an opportunity?
All the time. All the time. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting shift in how this developed for me as a business person. So as I went from being a trainer to having my own corporate training setup, um, I always used to think that the clients choose you. And it's all about being chosen, being perfect, being valuable enough to be chosen, or being able to communicate the value of what you do to be chosen. But I think the world is shifting towards service providers choosing the clients that they work with. And people don't talk about this enough, but from where I come from, this is a huge shift. So there's this book that I read that's called The Pumpkin Plan.
Hmm?
And it talks about how you need to know what are the three non-negotiables you have before you select a client to work with. And if a client ticks even two out of the three boxes, that's when you take them on. Otherwise, it's going to be a drain on your resources and you're not going to enjoy working with them. You're not going to be able to produce the results that you promised. You might underdeliver, and it's a direct hit to your reputation. So from there, I learned how to select the clients that I want to work with, and that's one of the biggest shifts that I see um, in the way I get business or I say no to business as well.
And was this an easy shift to make? Because I know
No,
in our younger years, we are always like, oh, yes, say yes to everything
yeah.
that comes. So,
Hmm.
how was that shift for you?
It is still hard. I have to remind myself every time that I do have a choice. And it helps to initially have a backup in terms of not being desperate to get a certain client or a certain type of client. It helps to spread your net wide so that you always have clients in the pipeline. But yes, it's still a difficult shift. And I think I keep reminding myself of that. Another person who talks a lot about that is Chris Do. And I think his content also helps me keep that on top of my existence, I think.
Yeah, he has a great LinkedIn channel
Yeah.
and platform.
And Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I also need a reality check, I listen to
Mhm.
I listen to
Yeah.
his videos.
He'll give it to you straight. He's nasty in a nice way, I think.
You do need that though. Sometimes
Mm.
I was listening to this interview from this Navy SEAL commander. His name is Mark Devine, the retired Navy SEAL
Hmm.
commander. And
Hmm.
he had a quote where he said, I have many mentors and guides, and not all of them are alive. And he was actually referring to books and the
Yeah.
texts that have come down from a lot
Yeah.
of older people like Marcus Aurelius and things like that.
Mm. Mm.
And sometimes we are all not lucky enough to have in-person people who will guide us. And that's where,
Mm.
for example, we'll listen to Chris Doe, he gives us a
Yeah.
reality check. So in one way, he's like a guide who's just
Yes,
bringing us back on track. Like, this is
absolutely.
what you need to focus on.
Mm. And that's why, see, this is what I want to say. I think this brings home a point about imposter syndrome. Like, what if he gave into his own imposter syndrome? Millions would not have the support that we have today. So that's
Yeah.
what I tell my client. Your message matters. Even if it is the same message as maybe 10 other people, the way you say it is going to land on a very specific set of people differently
Yeah.
and will motivate them into taking a certain kind of action. So
Yeah.
I think we should not give in to the imposter syndrome so easily and have the courage to put ourselves out there bit by bit and then, get over the fear of being seen.
Yeah.
Because there's someone out there waiting to hear your message in the way you say it.
Yeah, yeah. I actually
Yeah.
feel that way when on my newsletter, once I had written a post about why we don't talk about menstruation and periods at the workplace and why we need to
Mm.
stop doing that. We need to openly talk about it. And I had a
Hmm.
bunch of people unsubscribe, and I was like, oh shit.
Mm.
And then, but then
Yeah.
one lady who subscribed to me, she sent me a really nice note saying, this is
Mm.
we need to hear, we need to talk about it. And so
Yeah.
I felt like, okay, okay. The message, the people who were right for this, they have stayed on for after that.
Absolutely. Mm. I think you build a true and loyal audience only once you have these hot takes out in the open and you know who your message is tailored for. So, yeah, it is really scary. But once you do it and you know that the people who are following you are here for you and your message, it becomes easier.
And
And I
how
love
have
the point.
you,
I think I missed that newsletter. I love the point about talking about menstruation in the workplace. It's about damn time.
one of the continuing this, one of the most surprising things that I found is I have had to often fight in the different workplaces I've been in. I have had to
Mm-hmm.
fight to get those topics out in the open to talk about it
Mm.
because
Mm.
I've seen that there's just so much stigma attached to it, and
Mm.
and especially in my observation when I've seen um, women face the challenge of talking about it because how the culture that is prevalent in many workplaces and things.
Mm-hmm.
So in my opinion, often men do need to take that step of also creating that space where those discussions can happen because just
Yeah.
how entrenched a lot of stigma is, unfortunately.
And you can feel it in the air. I think a person can only share proportional to the capacity of the listener to
Yeah,
accept what they want to say. So I think creating that safety and the normalcy around it is so important for
yeah.
them. Mm.
And that's also a skill to build. Like, what are your thoughts? How do you train your team um, to get good at creating that space to have those difficult conversations? Because that's not an easy thing.
It's not an easy thing. And it's not an instant thing either.
Yeah.
So I haven't done something like this before, but I can venture a guess as to how it might go in an
Hmm.
organization. So I feel like the first thing to do would be to not invalidate the stigma to start with.
Yeah.
The first thing to do would would be just to get them to speak about what it is about the topic that makes them uncomfortable. And you'll be surprised about the range of answers you'll get.
Yeah.
Okay. And it'll give you such a good idea of what's going on in their heads. It might be a past incident, it might be a general messaging in their home or their society. It might be they don't want to be perceived a certain way. It could be anything, right? We don't know.
Yeah.
And if you start with I don't know and you kind of get them to speak about it, is when they'll get empty of whatever they have in their heads about the topic. And then I think drafting the right message as to why this should be normalized and then repeating that message over and over again over the course of years is what will bring the change, I think.
Yeah.
So one is to know what is bothering them and addressing it head on, and then creating the messaging of why something is normal.
Yeah.
And taking the time to repeat that message. So if you think about it, all our conditioning didn't happen in a day.
Yeah.
We've been hearing the same messages about how men are supposed to act and how women are supposed to
Yeah.
act over decades for us to now embody those things that we've started to believe. So the change is not going to be instant. So I think remembering that it's going to take a lot of patience and repetition and openness. And I don't think, so this is the hardest part for me. I don't think dismissing the stigma that people have is going to work. So I think we lose the battle in the first step. We start dismissing what they say. And if we can just do that right, the chances of us creating this change increase.
That's the hardest thing, though.
It
to
is the
create
hardest
a
thing.
space where
Oh my God,
there is no
yeah.
judgment.
Exactly. Even for the stigma, even for the even for their judgment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Create a space for that. That is one of the toughest things.
Hardest things to do.
And
Sure.
it's like I can't even say how easy or difficult, because it's very difficult. Like it forces us to also confront a lot of things about ourselves.
Absolutely. See, that's the hard part. But I was just coming to that. I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. And lately, I've also been failing in doing this for my people. I think I'm genuinely pretty good at doing this for most people. But lately, I've been failing at this, and I kind of got to thinking about why that is. I don't think you can be in a space of non-judgment if you're not okay with yourself and how you are. If you're struggling with basics in terms of mental health, or for example, I'm going through a transition period in my career. So that's been a little bit challenging for me to find the direction as to what the next 10 years will look like. So if you're coming from a place where you're dealing with certain things yourselves, you cannot create that space for another, and you can't fake it, So once you regulate yourself and you come home to yourself and you stop judging yourself, is when you kind of are able to provide that space to someone else.
Yeah, that's a powerful lesson as well. And unfortunately, I don't think it can be taught. It has to emerge. It has to emerge. I don't think you can teach people to be non-judgmental. I think like you said, only when you are in a space where you are stable, you are kind to yourself, you are non-judgmental with yourself, do you then become a person who can facilitate that kind of an environment, right?
Yeah.
I don't think there's any formula to teach that.
I think you can. I think there are programs out there teaching that. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think the Landmark Forum does that beautifully.
Okay.
There are ways to teach it. We just don't know it. And if you think about it, for example, if there's a child in a family that's generally non-judgmental, and there's a child in a family that's very judgmental, I'm pretty sure judgment comes to people naturally. And there's somebody in the family who said, no, we don't judge. That's not who we are. You teach people how to behave and how not to behave. And I know offices in which there have been people who've come out as homosexuals.
Right.
And I was taught not to judge. And I was taught how to make them feel accepted and how to deal with my own stigma back when I was a teenager. So I think helping people understand these things is the first step towards compassion. Right. And I think that can be taught. I disagree with that.
No, and now that you explained that, I need to clarify my point. What
Sure.
I meant was that you can teach, like the
Mm.
part that you said, you can teach that.
Mm.
But I need to be in a state where I am open to
Ah.
accepting that teaching that you're giving me,
Mm.
right? At least, like, even when we are kids and we are told, don't do this, if even then, if I personally, as because there are many things I was told as a kid, don't do this, I still did those things,
Yeah.
right? And even as an adult, there have been things that I've been told, okay, don't do this, or you're wrong, or this is that. But I have not been in the state to accept
Mm.
what is being told to me.
Mm.
At least in my personal experience, I have found that unless I am in that open state to
Mm.
receive what is being taught or told to me,
Mm.
that change doesn't come in my experience. So we can
Yeah.
disagree or
No,
have.
I see what you're saying. And of course, we all have limitations as to what we can and can't accept. But I think that changes with time, that changes with the environment that you're in.
Mhm.
So 5 years in an organization that has a non-judgmental culture is going to have an impact on you, whether you like it or not. And
Yeah,
of course, even then there are people who might not want to go in that direction decidedly and
yeah,
intentionally, and that's fine.
yeah.
But I feel like environments have a very powerful role to play as well. At
Understood.
least they've had in my life. Because
Understood.
environments reinforce certain messages, and reinforcement is what it takes, you know. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it might be something worth thinking about for me as well. But I just think of the things that my parents repeated over the years, and I did not see value in them until I was 20 for
Mm,
20 years. But later on,
yeah.
those things start to take shape in your head. I think brainwashing wouldn't exist if that wasn't true. And we know people can be brainwashed so easily into doing whatever you want them to do. No,
Yeah.
I'm just joking. But yes, I agree. There are always limitations to what you can and can accept at a particular stage in life, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Tapsi, last question for you. What
sure.
makes you happy these days?
Oh, that's such a good question. Um, what makes me happy these days is being able to write. I always wanted to write as a child, but I never really pursued it because I wasn't exceptional, but I really enjoyed doing it. But since I've started writing for my clients, I think that part of me who wanted to write is really happy.
Wow.
So yeah. Hmm.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And I hope you enjoyed the interview.
I loved talking to you, Raghav. Thank you so much for having me and all the best with your podcast.
Yeah, thank you.